ala Rasulillah. Inshallah, we'll take the questions now. If you have questions, please don't forget to mention your initials, first and last, city and state, country, village, province, region, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Ibn Victor, what you rocking today, man? Yeah? You got Allahu Akbar.
I'm curious, inshallah, to see what reflections you have with regards to the phenomenon of the clouding and the orange skies and the fire from Canada reaching here and these things.
Allahu Akbar. Brother, I'm not into none of those conspiracies, brother. We believe, we trust, and we follow our government and our authorities and our officials. We stay on the surface, all of that conspiracy theory, Illuminati stuff, we not with that. You gotta go to another mosque for that. Next question. Hamza.
What is the sunnah of visiting a grave?
The sunnah of visiting the grave. Jazakallahu khairan. First and foremost is proper intention. The benefit of visiting the grave, first and foremost, is for yourself. It's to be reminded of death, to be reminded of that inevitable eventuality. We're all going to go there one day. No matter how much money I got, no matter how fly I am, how hip, tough, cool, this, that, blah, 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 blah. No matter how young and strong I am, no matter how big and powerful, no matter how much knowledge I have, no matter how many people I know, no matter how many people work for me, no matter how many buildings I own, etc. Everybody is going to go to that grave. So you need to remind yourself that it is inevitable. And obviously, prepare for it before it's too late. Prepare for that grave before you're in it. As Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala said, Aqul al-nas, he says, the smartest of men. From the smartest of men, he says, Man anara qabrahu qabla an yaskunahu. The smartest of men are those who illuminate their graves before they have to dwell therein. Prepare for your lodging before you're lodging there. Common sense. You're not going to do all of your paperwork at the front desk of the hotel, right? Right or wrong? You're going to make your reservations before or not? You're going to make sure everything is good, the bed, no smoking, twin, king. You're going to make sure everything is ready because when you get there, you're going to be tired. It's a long journey. You want to just have a smooth transition. You don't want to do all of that stuff there. You don't have to pay. We're sold out. We don't have no more vacancies. All we have is this room and that room. So a smart person is the one who makes the preparations for sleeping before it's time to sleep. That's if you're sleeping. All right, so that's first and foremost. Secondly, you're going to do a means of service by making dua for the deceased. Asking Allah to forgive them, to have mercy upon them, to allow them into Jannah and to protect them from Jahannam. Nothing more. You're not going to make dua to them. Okay? Secondly, you should not travel to visit a grave. You should not go on a journey to visit a grave with the intention of making a spiritual trip, a spiritual journey just to visit this grave, for the grave itself and for the person in that grave. Thirdly, is that make sure that you behave yourself, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. You don't say anything which is obscene or lewd or batil or false or unbefitting. Okay? Remove your shoes in the graveyard if you can, if you have the ability to do so. All right? And you make dua for them. Wallahu ta'ala alam. As far as women visiting the graves, then that's a long story. That's a difference of opinion among the ulama of al-Islam. If you are going to visit the grave as a woman, make sure that you have the necessary control over your emotions. And make sure that you're dressed properly. And of course, a woman, just like a man, is supposed to be dressed properly. You're not supposed to be wearing tight clothes anyway. You're not supposed to be wearing perfume outside the house. You're not supposed to have makeup on your face anyway. You're not supposed to have your feet exposed anyway, let alone at the graveyard, at the gravesite, in which men are supposed to be reminded of Allah and not how beautiful and dainty her feet look, or her hands, or how sweet her perfume smells. That's a problem. But obviously we know Many women, unfortunately, don't have the proper hijab. Whether it's their husband's fault or their father's fault or whatever the reason may be. At least if you are going to go to the graveyard, make sure you cover properly. And do not be a distraction from the purpose of visiting the grave. Also, if you want to go to the graveyard, do not mix with men or do not mix with women in the improper manner. The improper free mixing. Okay? Khairan inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu alam. Fadl akhi.
Sheikh, so is it impermissible to travel out of state for the sole purpose of visiting somebody's grave?
We just explained that.
So out of state is that
You should not travel to make worship. Now, somebody may argue, well, the graveyard is out of state or out of the city. There's no graveyard in my locale. I have to travel. And I'm not traveling to the grave with the intention of specific ibadah. I'm not traveling li sharaf al-buq'a, for the nobility of the location, like Mecca, like Medina, the location itself. But I'm traveling because there's a hajjah, and perhaps that's different. Perhaps that's different. As far as someone who travels to a shrine because he believes in the reward and the virtue of the shrine, then that's totally a different story. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Fadl ya akhi.
I have a question regarding the divorces. Does the iddah period occur after the 2 talaqs or after the 3rd month? I wasn't in the previous class.
The iddah period is going to be after the first and after the second. And it's also after the third. But the difference between the first 2 and the third is that the first 2 are iddah periods of reconciliation, in which the marriage is pending. Understand? It's pending. He can take her back tomorrow. He can take her back next month. They're still husband and wife technically, but the divorce process has been initiated. As far as the 3rd talaq, there's no more reconciling or getting back together. She must wait the iddah period before she can remarry. That way, one garden will not be watered by 2 gardeners. The mixing of lineage. She gets married to a man and she's still pregnant with her ex-husband's child. Understand? That is why she is supposed to wait to make sure that she isn't pregnant. Clear. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Hamza.
Is there any benefits on dying in like a Thursday night or after Maghrib? Thursday after Maghrib.
Jumu'ah is a blessed time. There's no doubt about that. Jumu'ah is the best day of the week. The best day over which the sun has risen. There's no question about that. So there's a general virtue of being born and dying in virtuous times and virtuous places. As far as hadiths regarding that, are they authentic? That's a different discussion. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Na'am akhi.
We mentioned about whether or not the woman has rights to lodging and spending after a divorce, and that's different whether she's pregnant or not. Was a revocable and an irrevocable divorce also a condition for the difference of opinion?
For sure. As we mentioned, the raja'iyah, the divorce which is revocable, she deserves both. All scholars. But they're only differing on the 3rd and final one. Understand? The 3rd and final one. Wallahu alam. Amjad.
What if someone says that, I can't lodge this woman in my home because I fear for zina?
Figure it out.
Shouldn't have divorced.
He got to figure it out somehow.
He just has to control
Obviously, for a man to say, I don't want this woman staying in my house because, whatever can happen, that clearly supports the view of those who say what? Hey, it makes no sense. If the marriage is irrevocable, why is she in close vicinity of me? Versus, or in contrast, akhi, to the first divorce or the second divorce, in which you seeing her and desiring her is intended. Maqsood. Sheikh, the 2 rak'ah, right? In all 4 seasons. She's divorced, she's in the house. She's supposed to put on your favorite dress. or whatever else you like. You may not like a dress, right? She's supposed to put on your what? Your favorite clothes. She's supposed to put on your favorite perfume. She's supposed to adorn herself and beautify herself. And basically, she's supposed to tell you, hey, look, you see this? Don't let this pass you by. You understand? That's hikmah. There's wisdom behind that. She's supposed to make your favorite dish. She's supposed to do everything that she can to tell you, don't let me go. Or if not, Brother Fulan will appreciate it. I don't understand this one man's trash is what? This is a wise statement, and there's wisdom in that. But the third and final divorce, he can't get back with her unless, so it only makes sense for them to be what? Separate. So the moment, many scholars, they say, the moment he sleeps with her, the iddah is done. Even without intention. You understand this? So she's supposed to, step her game up. That is the wisdom of them being in the same house. You clear that or not? And the fact that you fell victim, the fact that you were weak, maybe that's a delay and a proof that you're not what? That you need to stay with her. Everybody with me or not? Are we on the same page or not? Right? Wallahu it's very important to understand that Islam is based off of hikmah. Alright? Wallahu alam. From online.
Initials ID in Georgia. I'm curious, are there any hadith on why we do the actions we do in Salah? May Allah forgive all the Muslims to grant them all relief in this life and the next time.
Hadiths on why we do what we do in the Salah? As far as every specific position or statement and detail, then in general, no. But the general wisdom of the Salah is for the dhikr of Allah. It's to worship Allah. So a big part of the specifics of the ibadah are dogmatic. Not all, but many, if not what? Most. The specifics, why we have to make wudu like this, like that, so on and so forth. Many scholars have explained the positions of the salat and the steps of wudu and ghusl, etc., and found different wisdoms and different secrets. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us about them specifically, oh, you believe, make ruku because of this and because of that. The Prophet ﷺ saying that you have to make ruku because of this, because of that. Make sujood first, make this. That's a different story. Wallahu alam.
Initials AK from St. Louis, Missouri. Assalamu alaikum mufti. Are there any videos or other resources you would recommend for someone wanting to learn how to pray whilst traveling? I don't know the ruling, but I am having a hard time finding material on it on YouTube. When going east in the plane, what time do I pray?
Right. We've spoken about this many times before, and perhaps we need to speak about it some more. Perhaps we need to make some specific workshops just on the fiqh of traveling via air or by air. Until that happens, what you're going to do is you're going to abide by principles. Principle number one, prayer is a must in all situations. Principle number two is that there are rules to prayer that must be followed to the best of one's ability. Principle number three, when you lack the necessary ability, or when it's a difficulty or hardship, then those rules you become exempt from following, but you don't become exempt from the first rule, which is prayer being obligatory. So therefore, you have to stand up when you pray, unless you can't. You have to face the qibla when you pray, unless you cannot. You have to have wudu, ghusl for the prayer, unless you cannot. So therefore, if you can stand up on the plane, you stand up. If you can't, it's too tight, there's no space, the people are looking at you, it's the bathroom, the back where they have the coffee, there's nowhere to stand. Then you have to pray sitting down, especially if you're going to land and miss that prayer. As far as combining prayer, Dhuhr and Asr, different story. Or even if you have to combine sitting down, not facing the Qibla, you do the best that you can. As far as the time zones, then first and foremost, you're going to base the time zone on where you are. So if you have a flight, the flight is leaving JFK or LaGuardia, let's say at 7 p.m. 7 p.m., right? And your flight is going to Paris, Charles de Gaulle, right? Okay, my flight leaves JFK, for argument's sake, 7 p.m. Obviously, we'll leave later than that. As soon as it gets dark outside, When does it get dark in New York City? 8:30? So you've been on a plane for an hour, 2 hours, you see the sky has changed outside. It's time to make Maghrib. You make your Maghrib and you make your Isha. No matter where you are, on the eastern sector, the Atlantic Ocean, for sure Maghrib is in. For sure Maghrib is in. There's no doubt about that. You make your Maghrib and your Isha. Now, you're on a plane. When does Fajr come in? You have to gauge that. How long is the flight? What's the closest time zone to where you are? The closest island? When are you planning on landing in France? What is the time difference between France and Eastern time? You have to gauge, and eventually you'll fall in one of those slots. And you can make a pretty good estimate on this is the time to pray. So right now I've been on a plane for 4 hours. The local time is such and such. The closest time zone to me is such and such on the map. Bang. Prayers in 30 minutes. Prayers in an hour. Everyone understand this? And be very careful and be very mindful of what Allah Azza wa Jalla says about the heavens and the earth, the moon and the sun, the stars, and Allah talks about the day and the night. يَطْلُبُهُ حَثِيثًا is that it comes rapidly. And when you're in an airplane, you see how rapidly things change. Next thing you know, it's dark, and before you know it, you snooze off, you eat something, you look at it, and the next thing you know, boom, sunlight. So you have to be mindful of all of those things. Wallahu ta'ala alam, that's in brief.
Initials SM from Pennsauken, New Jersey. What is the hadith regarding taking advantage of things before they change? And the wording that speaks about a tyrant ruler being placed over you. I cannot locate it.
Allahu alam. What's important is if you're talking about اغتنم خمسا قبل خمس, take advantage of 5 things before 5, then that's one thing. As far as take advantage of things before they change with regards to a tyrant ruler, لا أدري. I'm unfamiliar with that. Wallahu alam.
Initials STA from Huntsville, Alabama. Assalamu alaikum. I want to follow the sunnah. Should I wear and act upon cultural sunnahs if it makes the people around me uncomfortable or stare?
You want to follow the sunnah. Should you follow the cultural sunnahs? It makes people stare at you. I don't understand sunnah, cultural sunnah. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. If the cultural sunnah is to cover your head, you cover your head. But if it's the cultural sunnah, why are the people going to stare at you? If it's cultural sunnah, I don't understand the question 100%.
Initials MS Gansu Canada. I love reading the books of Ibn Taymiyyah. Can I read Al-Ghazali? Some say I can't read Al-Ghazali because he's the opposite of Ibn Taymiyyah and was not understood. I'm confused.
طيب. Can I read the books of Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, or not? Some say yes, some say no. I'm confused. Al-Ghazali, may Allah have mercy upon him, was a scholar of Islam. He said things that were right, and of course he said things that were wrong, like any other human being. Depending on your level of knowledge, how strong you are, that will dictate what books you can and cannot, should or should not read. Whoever the scholar may be. An advanced student of knowledge, someone who's learned, who's strong, can read whatever he wants to read and find the benefit and discard that which is wrong or incorrect or controversial. A beginner, a baby, someone who's in an intermediate level, different story. Would you give a baby a whole fish to eat? You would not. Would you give a toddler a whole fish to eat? You would not. Would you give a 5-year-old child, a 6-year-old child a whole fish to eat that comes from an island and they know they eat a lot of fish? You take the bones out, you take this out, that's a different story. So we have the fillet of fish, we have the mushed up fish, right? You have a small little tiny baby, 6-year-old, 5-year-old, you mush the food up, you put it in his mouth. So that is the similarity of knowledge. You can't read anything. But when you get to a certain level, a 12-year-old young man, he's about to be in puberty, he knows what to do with the fish. Whoever the scholar is. There are books of Ibn Taymiyyah that you should not read unless you're on a certain level, right? What's important is that's the general advice with regards to properly studying and properly reading books. But one thing I will mention is that we do not support, nor do we condone fanaticism, blind fanaticism, and just disrespect for people. And you'll find people of many extremes. You'll find people that'll talk about Ghazali, and Ghazali is the champion of Islam. And then if they're asked about Ibn Taymiyyah or any other scholar, the first thing they'll say, oh, he made mistakes, so on and so on and so forth. But then they get mad when people do the same with Ghazali. So you can be a fanatic of Ghazali, but you can't be a fanatic of Ibn Taymiyyah. Right? So the fanaticism, the bigotry, it only leads to further bigotry, to counter bigotry. I don't understand this. So be careful, be mindful of this. Wallahu alam. Hamza.
What's the ruling of having, like, what's the difference of having a janazah inside and a janazah outside? Is it permissible to do it inside?
It's permissible to do it in the masjid for sure. Wallahu alam.
Exactly.
Initials AM Toronto, Ontario. Assalamualaikum Shaykh. What is your view on using Muslim marriage apps?
We're using what?
Muslim marriage app.
Using a Muslim marriage app. Regardless of my view, my opinion, I think the Muslim marriage apps suit the current time in which we live. What's the rule on buying something from Amazon? Are you going to the marketplace? Are you going to the bazaar? Like 7th century Baghdad? Or are you in the convenience of your home, scrolling, adding to your cart? So there's virtual, long distance, online. You have access to things around the world. That is your 7th century spice market. So if you're buying and selling long distance, even though you might want to see the product or you haven't experienced, it only makes sense for other services and other needs to also be what? Digitized and virtually accessible. All right? Do you depend upon the marriage app 100%? Do you show everything on the marriage app 100%? No. But I think it's a little contradictory for people to say you can buy and sell online, you can get a car online, you can do this online, but you can't have any marital services online. That's not adding up. That's not realistic of how we live. Everyone understand this? But it doesn't mean that the halal becomes haram and the haram becomes halal. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
Initial MS Cancer Canada. How do we know if Allah loves us? What if people outside see you as such a pious person, but you know that it does not mean Allah loves you because you are so imperfect?
If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the people to love you and to think good of you and to think well of you, take that. And if you still feel bad, you still feel shamed, you still feel guilty, use that energy, translate that energy into tawbah, and to rectifying what the people don't see. The people think that you're righteous and knowledgeable on the outside, alhamdulillah for that. Don't reject that, don't deny that. That's what Allah wanted it to be. Now you need to know, or now you need to fix the inside. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And just because you have sins, or you make mistakes, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates you absolutely, or Allah doesn't love you absolutely. Right? Be careful of the tricks of the shaitan. Wallahu alam.
This was LM Columbus, Ohio. Who is financially responsible for a wife and children if her husband dies and leaves no inheritance? If the husband has older children from his wife, is it wajib for them? Is it wajib for them too? And if there are women who are married, are they still required to pay and provide for their half siblings?
What's important is a man dies, he leaves a widow, he leaves children, and he leaves no inheritance, correct? Who's responsible for that widow and those children? Whoever has the ability to maintain them. If the family members have the ability, it doesn't harm them, and the woman needs it, they take care of her. And if not, then the Islamic community. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Initials HS Sarajevo, Bosnia.
Sarajevo.
Okay. What are the etiquettes of a marriage meeting? Can there be joking occasionally? How many meetings are allowed? If they decide to get engaged, can they still talk until the nikah?
As far as a marriage meeting, there's nothing wrong with making jokes. Of course, the jokes have to be permissible jokes like any other time. You cannot lie even when joking. You cannot exaggerate even when joking. You cannot be immoderate even when joking. Those are rules of jokes all of the time, before, during, and after marriage. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having a sense of humor. Rather, perhaps it's encouraged. Having a sense of humor, smiling, is a means of you being who you are. And perhaps it's a means of you seeing who she is or who he is. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as the jokes are permissible and suitable. All right? You can't joke about something which is inappropriate, etc. All right? My advice, wallahu alam, is when you go on a sit down to get married, don't be a robot. Don't go there, don't be a robot. Be yourself. Don't be too crazy. But just be yourself. Be who you are. Allow them to see who you are. Be yourself. Be real. Just like that. That smile right there, right? If you smile, you like smiling, you smile. If you have an ice grill, then mashallah, it's nothing. Be yourself, right? That's my nasiha. Don't be a robot, okay? As far as talking during the engagement, after the sit down, that's also fine as long as it's lawful, as long as no boundaries are transgressed. Tayyib. How many sit downs can you have? Depends on how often you need. What you need to get to know that person. How many meetings you need in which you feel confident that I'm ready to marry this person. Of course, you'll never truly know a person until after you married him. Getting married is always a roll of the dice. That's a fact. The Muslim makes tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You marry a woman, you marry a husband, it doesn't work out, it wasn't meant to be, alhamdulillah. You learn from it. It's a learning curve. You gain experience in life, you make dua for them, you have to separate. It's not the end of the world. All right? So put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try to get to know the person the best way you can. Know for sure it's not but so far you can go. Talking to someone on the phone is not like living with them, no matter what. And take it slow, take it easy, inshallah ta'ala. Be yourself, make a lot of dua, and just ask the right questions, inshallah ta'ala. All right, wallahu alam.
Initials ZD, Toronto, Ontario. Any advice or sunnahs from the Prophet on air quality that may be potentially harmful?
Air quality that may be potential or harmful. This will be our last question tonight. What's important is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sought Allah's refuge from illness and disease. All right? So if you seek Allah's refuge from illness and disease, you also have to do what you need to do to avoid illness and disease. So if you know that the air quality is poor, take the necessary means to protect yourself from that bad air quality. It's just that simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Wa sallallahu sallam wa baraka ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabiyina wa imamina Muhammad.